get started. I just was expecting to see something different than this time. Um, so hello, thank you for joining us for our discussion about the Regional Climate Action Plan. I'm Whitney Catchmark with the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. We have a short presentation today. We want to give you a status update on what we've been working on and get your input. And so that is the theme of the day. So I will go ahead and start my slides. At any point in time, if you want to ask questions, please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And we will also put some information in the chat, so feel free to check that spot as well. All right. All right. Is this the full screen as I expected? Awesome. Thank you all. Okay, so just a little refresher for folks who aren't familiar with the Planning District Commission. We work with 17 localities, basically from Gloucester and Williamsburg down to Virginia Beach, and then out west to Southampton County. Later, I'll talk a little bit about the commission. We have local elected officials that help inform our work program. And then we have a relatively small staff, and then we work with all the local staffs. So I'm sure several of you have been on the earlier meetings, but just to remind you, for this grant, we'll work with our PDC localities and then a couple in North Carolina. We got a grant from the EPA a while ago to do a plan focused on how to reduce greenhouse gases. We're pretty far along in that process. We got the grant. We needed to write a preliminary action plan. We did that really quickly. Now we're trying to do a little bit more thorough job, and you'll see more details when you see the draft report. Getting more input as we go along. And like I said, the goal is to identify both the sources and then some strategies for greenhouse gas reductions. The three descriptions of sort of our goals are: we're trying to deliver cleaner air, reduce harmful air pollution in where you live, work, and play. We're trying to tackle the damage that climate pollution can cause, and at the same time support job growth and lowering energy costs, because who wouldn't want a lower energy bill, right? And lastly, we're trying to work with communities to address these issues and do a little bit more outreach on this plan in particular. So just to capture why we're focusing on greenhouse gases, they can destabilize the climate. Around here, we've seen some changing weather patterns, more rain or more intense storms. We have some sea level rise. It's caused shoreline flooding. It's occasionally extreme heat. And so many of these strategies are focused on reducing methane and carbon dioxide to try to get at that impact of greenhouse gases. All right, so before I go into any more details, I sort of want to get to the crux of this. We're at a stage where we're going to release a draft report in a few months. The final report has to be approved by our commission turned into the EPA by the beginning of December. So at this point where we want your input, we want to know if we got some things wrong. You can give us some feedback on how we could tweak them. But one of the biggest adds we want to this process is to get your priorities. So we have created a survey, and it talks about 6 different sectors, and I'll go over them today. But when I go through them, I'm just going to hit them at a really high level, because otherwise I'd be reading you these lists of different ideas we have. And what we want you to do is to take this survey. It doesn't take that long, just to sort of prioritize what you think is important. And that will help us in a couple of ways. One, it'll help us make the report better. But then after we turn in the report, we'll talk to elected officials and leaders and stakeholders in the region about what we should work on. Of all these different ideas, what are the strongest ideas? What are the most urgent ideas? And having the survey data to say, hey, the people who are interested in this is what they told us was important. That would be essential to those conversations. So That's what we're hoping for. If you scan this QR code with the camera on your phone, it will take you to the survey. It's active. It's going to be active for a month. And please share it with anyone you know. It's also available on our website. And I believe, sorry, I can't see the chat at this time, but Casey's probably put in the chat this outline that has more details. So, give me a few more minutes of your time and I'll go over this at a high level, but then you can, if you want to do a deep dive, you can read the outline and get even more details. So
real just interruption, the QR code is apparently not working. So I put a link in to the survey, and so that will get you there no matter what. So
thanks. Okay. All right. So are there any questions in the Q&A that we should talk about now before I move through the sectors? Nope. All right. Okay, so the first sector I wanted to hit was industry. So, the general idea is how could we support emission reductions from industrial and commercial processes? This isn't a huge sector for Hampton Roads, but we do want to at least address it. I talked to the Centerra's sustainability officer, and they've done a ton of stuff, and a lot of their improvements not only reduce greenhouse gases, but reduce their energy bill. And we feel like there'd be a lot of other industrial and commercial facilities who want to hear about that. So we're thinking maybe we could create a workshop and get more people talking. We also want to try to look at planning to identify what industries might be able, or might be a good fit for hydrogen, either to use it or produce it, carbon capture, or some other different kinds of alternative energy sources. So the industry one is a little bit shorter than the others, but we'd love to have your input on that. Next up is solid waste and wastewater. These are kind of grouped together, but as you can imagine, solid waste is about what goes to landfills. A lot of these recommendations talk about how can we align our outreach efforts and messages between the South Side and the Peninsula, solid waste management facilities, try to make them more effective, talk about not only recycling, but composting. We think there's just some room for improvement. There's a lot of technology changes coming, but we can share that information and hopefully do more on that front. And then sort of the second half of this sector is wastewater. And so in this region, that's pretty much HRSD. And the HRSD has a lot of ideas that are already in the works. So this plan sort of supports those. A couple ideas are using the incineration of waste that comes from treating wastewater and turning it into natural gas. Another idea kind of like that is taking biosolids, which is also the what's left after you treat the wastewater, and turning that into biochar, which can be a very a useful sort of product. So on that front, it's good to have regional actors that are already moving in these directions. So next up is agricultural and natural lands. Again, there are lots of details in this outline, but I just want to give you a flavor of what will be in this report and what is in the survey that we're asking you to react to. So the first piece here is, preserve, protect, increase forest, tree canopy, wetlands. And there's a lot of green things in Hampton Roads, but a lot of these actions are to do more. And then we try to look at some very specific programs and say, hey, maybe there's 2 localities that have done this, but it would be great if more did. One is set canopy goals and work with the Green Infrastructure Center. A couple have already done that. Do urban heat analyses to see where we could maybe cool the community by having more trees, more green stuff. And then another specific example I wanted to share is the Chesapeake Bay Foundation worked with Hopewell and it really looked at where to put trees in low-income communities that would help with air quality, would help with heat, would help with runoff. So that's one of the things we're doing. Some of these aren't really unique ideas, but trying to find programs that can be adopted or copied, we think will make it easier. In terms of the second thing on here, supporting local food production, trying to expand farm to school programs, trying to support more farmers markets to support local food farmers, I guess, and then also to make it a little bit easier to have urban gardens and look at any kind of barriers that might make that a little bit more challenging instead of providing incentives to make it easier. The third piece on this is increased soil conservation practices. This is one we haven't talked about a lot, but some ideas is if you think about it, in some of our urban areas, the land and the soil has been compacted a lot. That makes it hard to grow things. It makes there be more runoff typically. And so we can look at that and how maybe we can improve that. The last bullet on there about agricultural management practices, there's a ton, but it's things like how you manage manure. Could we add trees where people have livestock to make there be more of a carbon sink? So like I said, lots of specific details in our outline. All right. Just going to check for a second. Are there any questions?
Right now, the questions are being answered in the Q&A. The participants, if you do want to speak, I think you can have a raise hand function, and we can unmute you, but if not, just please keep populating that Q&A.
All right. I'm going to move on to transportation then. So this transportation slide, we really have whittled down what is in the what's on the slide is really a compact, shortened version of what is in the report. We've had lots of conversation about this. So please, again, look at all the details, but the big buckets are to increase zero emission vehicle adoption. There's kind of two big pushes there. One is to work with local governments like on fleets, both public works, schools, and then also try to do more to encourage adoption in the larger community. So there's a lot of ways to do that. Some examples are, to have more green expos where people can see fleet vehicles, can hear stories about and experiences of other people, like in public works departments or procurement officers, so that we can make this easier for any locality that is interested. Talk about assessment tools, like what kind of tools would make it easier to identify the cost of buying new, say, electric vehicles, and what's the payoff and things like that. On many of these topics, I'm kind of glossing over outreach. There's a ton of work that could be done, probably a lot cheaper, right? If we collaborate, than if every locality or every NGO tries to develop their own outreach material. Let's see, we are thinking that we could look at gaps in charging infrastructure. Where are there high demand areas, maybe some tourist routes and things that it would be really smart to have more EV charging. Another specific example is like a template of how to build a charging facility that is both available to the public, but then is also sort of designed for the fleets to use. And so maybe you have some control of how you pay and who pays. That's been a little bit of a challenge for some folks. So that's what we're thinking there. At the bottom of that box, we have the port. Probably not doing the port justice with one bullet. They have a very forward-leaning program. We've captured a lot of the things they've already been working on in terms of being switching to clean energy. they have a whole list of like next steps. For example, is trying to switch in terms of electrification to even get the drayage trucks, which are the ones that do the short haul, to give grants and incentives to switch those to electric trucks, as well as just, so much of the equipment on the port itself. So definitely look at those initiatives, and we, just like kind of HRSD, where this report's just supporting all of those efforts. The lower box on this slide is reduce vehicle miles, and there's a lot of things that can fit under there. One of the focuses is transit. A lot of folks told us they want more transit. There is a fairly well-developed concept called 757 Express, which is a backbone of rapid bus transit. The report right now, the recommended actions sort of say, embrace this, implement it, do it as soon as possible. That gives people these key routes at a high frequency. Then think about expanding it. And also think about doing bus stop audits on that backbone. See if those facilities are welcoming and people want to be at those bus stops. And one sort of creative idea from that is to see if we can get some folks to adopt the bus stop, to have universities or companies who help take care of them and maybe make them a little bit nicer. So that's that transit piece. Another part of it is looking at transit development, which is kind of, can we build communities or neighborhoods that are a little bit more walkable, bikeable, or on these backbones of rapid bus transit. And then the last piece, which is not a small one, which is build more infrastructure for cyclists and pedestrians. In the region, we have a really good vision now of a set of trails that would connect a lot of our area from Williamsburg to Virginia Beach and out west. And so there's a lot of interest in building that out and trying to do that as soon as possible. And you can actually start see the trails have been laid out, and there's like a really solid plan. So that's transportation. So now I'm going to move to buildings. Buildings is much like transportation. It's actually a really big sector for us. Lots of people interested. We have some actions that are focused more on local governments and schools, some others that are more about businesses. So what we heard from a lot of local staff is they'd love to see case studies in terms of converting schools and the local government buildings, the admin buildings, the public works. Like, what works? What are upgrades that really pay off and people had a good experience with? So we're going to work at collecting that data and making it easier to find, so that people don't have to work so hard for it. We heard from several localities they've had good luck at having audits of their buildings to make sure they understand how much energy each building's using and how, so that they can find places to make upgrades and save some money and help with climate. So we're going to try to make all those lessons learned a little bit easier to find. Some other things on those fronts are things like switching to LED lights and adding solar to buildings. So on more of a household scale, some of the recommendations are about weatherization programs. Those are some state, federal programs that help people get funding to do more with at their house to reduce energy consumption. One of the things we heard on that front is the people who run those programs would love some more help at making connections with multifamily partners. That's where you really need the owner often to be excited about this program, but it helps the people maybe renting have lower bills. So that was a good
Pardon me,
insight.
Whitney.
Yeah.
If If you have any questions and you're having trouble finding the Q&A function, it's going to be the little box at the bottom that has the question mark in it and says Q&A underneath it. And if you have any input, even if it's not necessarily a question, maybe it's a comment or maybe it's just some additional input as far as like additional insight into some of these proposed actions that we're describing or that Whitney's describing, please put it in the Q&A, and we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to be able to keep that conversation going. Thanks, Whitney.
Sure. The last thing I was going to touch on buildings is in terms of the commercial and industrial partners. We thought about, could we again do some lessons learned and some workshops, but also maybe have some recognition programs. And we found some other examples in other states, and we think, or in some of our localities that we think would be worth trying to expand. All right, so the last sector is energy. It is a big sector, but a lot of the energy policy and changes are likely to be handled at the state. But we did think there were some good ideas tied to solar, that we could create a regional solar hub where you'd have a lot of information. We could perhaps have a program where some of the contractors and programs could be vetted and people could get a lot of information in one place. There's also some programs that help drive local governments to streamline permitting and making it as easy as possible. And again, this is just building off of experience and saying, hey, if you want to have an easier process, here's some ways to do it. And then the last one is sort of a catch-all. We're still looking at wind, so offshore wind as an alternative, looking at nuclear and the sort of rapid developments on that front, to make that a viable alternative. And probably the third one in that group is storage, and how do you have energy storage that kind of pairs with some of these things like solar that maybe aren't a steady supply, but if you have storage, you can kind of blend them together so that you can use more green energy. All right, so those are the sectors. Lots more detail to dive into if you want to look at our outline. And definitely, again, we're just highlighting, please take the survey. It doesn't take that long. It's pretty easy to use. You just pick your top one and then you slide the other ones up and down. But it will really help us have some metrics. And if you have anything you want to add, we welcome emails. You can comment using our website, and then we will revise this plan. We will present it to our commission in the third Thursday of October, and we'll try to keep moving on this and the implementation. I suspect we'll have our big discussions about implementation in beginning of 2026, but we are excited. This is a new space. Again, happy to answer more questions, and I don't know if our QR code's working yet, but it will be soon. So I'm going to stop sharing and see where we are. It doesn't, okay, we don't have a lot of questions. We don't have a ton of people. So does anybody want to just ask a question? Let's see. So we will have the survey out for quite a while, for a month. And we really hope those of you who joined us today will forward it to your connections, your networks. If you represent a organization, please get some more people to tell us what they think, so we can build off of that.
Carolyn Kaywood asked, what about the low-income home weatherization that Reggie was funding?
So we were looking at the weatherization programs, not Not specifically what Reggie was funding. Some of that has continued. I can't speak too much to those details, but what we want to do is to build off of that, to look at, whether or not that funding is stable. I think some of it is, it's not all tied to Reggie, and then also try to help them be as effective as possible in those programs. And we'll write up more details. We talked to the NGOs who sort of work with the state on who implement those the weatherization programs. And who knows, maybe Reggie will come back. So
There was a question early on about funding. I don't know if we get that question a lot. We have the funding to continue. This plan is still good, but I don't know if you want to touch on how open-ended it is for the future.
Sure. So this was an odd program in that we across the country, most big metro areas got a planning grant, so money to write a plan. But there was a brief window to get implementation money. We applied. As a region, we didn't get it, but the state got some money to do a few projects, some conservation, some stuff on landfills and such, and coal mines, I believe. But that's a long wind up to say, but there is no set money after that for implementation. So moving forward, that will be our challenge, is to look for additional funding, whether or not we look for grants, or we talk to our local government folks to see if they want to make this a priority and fund some of these initiatives. There are a few things that the TPO already does, like transit kind of oriented and transportation trails, that are just sort of nudging one way or other. Same with like the poor and HRSD, but there are other spaces where without some new resources, it will be hard to do a lot more. So it is really a to be continued, but the plan helps us get started.
You have a question from Carolyn. Thanks. What about the parking lot solar bill that failed this year? I don't know if you're familiar with that bill or if you could add additional context.
I looked at that. I feel like it allowed you to require.
I think it was for parking decks. It was just enabling legislation. And Carolyn, your hand is raised. I can unmute you too, I believe. I have all kinds of power. Let me find it. All right, go ahead, Carolyn, if you can unmute yourself.
It was jumping around. I believe it was going to require probably specifications in terms of size of parking lots to, basically do a solar panel canopy, which would have the double benefit of shading cars while generating energy. And I think it was vetoed. But I didn't come prepared with that information.
Yeah, I will look into it. I remember reading it, but honestly, I don't remember the status of it. We will include some ideas about these kind of multi-use approaches. Yeah, the solar panels that also provide shade make some sense. You can also sometimes do solar panels and let some animals graze underneath them. So we will do our best to capture those things, but yeah, I don't know the details of that particular legislation and what was what was discussed during session.
And also, Carolyn, if you're able to send us the bill or the reference to it, then we can look at, what portions of it or parts of it may be suitable for the plan.
No. Got a couple more people, and at least a few of them aren't our typical steering committee members. Does anybody else have a question? I know that was kind of quick, but I do think you know, taking the survey and going through the outline will give you a really good handle on where we are. And we hope that, yeah, you'll tell us what we missed. Let's see, did we get another? Looking in the wrong place. We have one more question. Oh, thanks, Carolyn.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, thank you.
All right, so let's see any other questions. Hopefully everybody can see in the chat that the two links we provided. And let's see. All right, yes. I see what Carolyn added. Yeah. Well, it is hard to comment on why it was vetoed. But we'll look into it more. And who knows, like most of these things, right? It sometimes takes more than one round to pass. I feel like when we looked at solar and parking lots, it is pricey, but you know, if you want, like I said, the multiple benefits, some people had done a combination design where they had solar that was shading cars with electric vehicle charging stations underneath. So they went all in on the green approach. That was not local. All right, well, I feel like if there aren't any other questions, we can wrap it up. Yeah, please check out our webpage and look for updates and help us generate some of these survey responses. Anybody else have anything before we close this one out?
One more question on sea level rise. Any considerations for sea level rise?
So we are trying to address that. You know, it's kind of like an effect of greenhouse gases, and so we're including flooding and in our report as one of the sort of benefits if we can come up with solutions that, because it's twofold. Some of the recommendations in terms of more trees, more wetlands, those things can potentially help a little bit with flooding. Just reducing greenhouse gases should help if you think at the really big scale of trying to reduce the acceleration of sea level rise. Probably also affect rainfall changes. But this report is more focused, specifically on just the greenhouse gas reductions. We also have a lot of work on sea level rise and recurrent flooding, and there's initiatives on that front. So we're definitely in the space. And yes, subsidence. Yep, the PDC is working on that, has been, we have supported a report, the development of a report from USGS a while ago that looked at land subsidence, took the existing measurements. From that, we realized that we needed more measurements, so we fund some regional survey work. We've worked with USGS. They have put in these things called extensometers, but it's basically like a really, really long rod that goes down to bedrock and can measure how the land is moving up or down. And the state has helped fund some of those. So there really has been some attention paid to land subsidence. It's still pretty small, millimeters a year, but it's helpful to understand that and what's causing that, and how it fits into this picture with sea level rise and just our risk to flooding. It's not mentioned much in this report, but it is sort of rolled into that sort of flood vulnerability concept. You guys are covering all the issues. Let's see. All right. Well, I think we're going to adjourn this webinar, and we appreciate you coming. And by all means, yeah, let us know, follow-up emails if you have any questions, and look for that draft report after you do the survey. It'll be around in the fall. Thanks.